Okay, so we're here to discuss burnout, and this is configured as a podcast discussion group. So did everyone listen to the podcast? Okay, so discussion. This time I don't have anything prepared. I thought this would be good to just open it up. I talked too much in our last podcast discussion group.
I just want to offer, it was really helpful. I guess I just really had not thinking of it as the workplace, not individual. And just you talking about how it manifests itself and the causes, it really put a framework on. This is one of these terms that everyone uses. I'm feeling so burnout, but it was nice to put a framework on what that means and what it looks like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find that very helpful also, that it's felt at an individual level, but it's not an individual phenomenon. And, our perspective is so individual, like literally our perspective is from inside our head, inside our body. So it's often difficult to see, to kind of recenter that perspective outside of our own just individual cause, individual experience, individual control. But so many people experience it as so blaming when they feel it at just an individual level. This is me. I have done all these terrible things. I have put myself in a situation that is intolerable. I'm curious.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was also thinking about when I was reading the transcript today. I listened to the podcast a while ago, but I had to refresh my memory. One of the things that is related to this, and we can talk perhaps today, is how the North American understanding of hard work and value of hard work. It's a cultural aspect of this whole conversation, which doesn't exist in some other cultures. For example, in Turkey, you don't sacrifice your life to work. You have other priorities, and it's understood. Versus in North America, since I moved here to Canada and US, hard work is the best work, and you have to work hard. You have to show that you're working hard. Hard, just work. So that paradigm, I think, also needs to change or shift. It is. I see it. I think my generation is kind of doing it in a better way. But that's a part of that conversation too, I feel like.
What does it look like in Turkey?
It's a little bit more relaxed in terms of the fact that you can easily talk about the fact that your family comes first and other things that you will prioritize in life, and you can talk about those, and it's not misunderstood most of the time. That was my impression. Not again, I think it's a little bit different in academia, but when I see people in private sector especially, and how much they work, how hard they work, and they really do work. It's not just a facade. It's kind of ingrained in the culture. And people respect that, like you work hard, you work 7 days a week. That garners respect, instead of like people saying like, oh, you should rest. It's because people appreciate the fact that you're working. And that was one of the things I had to learn. For example, I had to learn not to tell people, you look like you need some rest, because people misunderstand it in that sentence in North America as if you look tired or like you are not putting in 100%. I actually used to mean when I first came to North America in Canada, 2004, that, you are working too hard, maybe take a break, just do something you like, maybe sleep. Then I was told that I shouldn't say this, people misunderstand it, and I learned and, adapt. But that was a transition I had to do from my personal experience.
Mm-hmm. I know some student affairs colleagues that I worked with several years ago were consistently overwhelmed with their level of work. But as a group, they agreed to stop talking about it, because the students that they were working with were developing this idea that the professionals that they respect lived in a constant state of overwhelm, and those were their role models. And they said, whether or not we're living in a constant state of being overwhelmed, we need to stop showing students that this is the way that professional people are. They also found that it was really discouraging students from coming to them, because they'd say, how are you doing? They're like, oh, I had something here. And they're like, oh, well, never mind. I won't talk to you about what was bothering me then.
And the same could be true for us. I know when students try to make an appointment, I said, well, I have a half an hour free 3 days from now. It's not terribly welcoming to them, other than, my scheduled office hours. It's hard. It's important that we let students know that we do have time for them. And it's sometimes hard.
So I'm curious what folks tend to notice first, because it differs by person. So like the 3 big chunks of burnout are feeling ineffective and cynical and exhausted. So do you tend to cue in more personally to your feelings of just tiredness, or do you cue in more to feeling like what you're doing is not going to work? Like it's just not going to work no matter what, or instead the feeling of cynicism that, like, where you start to lose that empathic response to your colleagues and your students. What do you notice?
I'm always cynical, I think. So that one's a hard one. I don't know if the cynicism would make you callous toward others, but so I don't know. I think faculty can be a cynical bunch. I would say exhaustion. And I guess one thing that struck out that I don't know that the podcast really got at is the coping mechanism. Maybe it's resilience, maybe is the best word. But what happens is things go wrong in your life, and my ability to cope with it and ride with it have been thoroughly compromised, right? Like whether it's a fender bender or, the washing machine is broken. I'm like, okay, the washing machine is broken. We need to get a new one. The washing machine is broken. Why does everything happen to me? Right. So, I mean, it's I think that one comes up too. And you talk work-life balance in your podcast, but I also think it's your ability to cope to personal or household, setbacks that come. Like last spring, there was just in the summer of 2021, Ed and I joked, we just had this, was the month of breakage. There was a month where things kept breaking, appliances and things just kept breaking. And I thought it was almost driving me to a nervous breakdown, and it was silly, right? Because it wasn't a financial thing. It wasn't like these things couldn't be repaired or fixed really easily. But, my ability to roll with it was seriously compromised.
I think it's funny that you mentioned that you're always cynical. So that's not what shows up first. I actually am always tired. I have been for like decades. I just live.
Well, not the exhaustion, but real sleep disturbances.
Like I'm just
since March 2020, major sleep disturbances, I think, for me.
Well, if I'm exhausted, I don't notice it because I live in a state of being tired. It's a normal part of my body, actually. But so I don't notice that piece, but I notice the ineffectiveness. That's the first piece that I notice. That I feel like it's like that thing with dishes where no matter how many you do, there's always more that are coming. But with email, it's like, I just can't think, no matter how much email I do, it just creates more and more. There's no point in responding, and it'll just be more. But of course there is, because all of you are waiting for me to respond to your emails.
I found that after this semester, the ineffectiveness was really a high one, but I'm not convinced it was just in my head. I think I have empirical evidence that I really was less effective. I mean, I gave the same final exam as fall 2019, and the average was down 25 percentage points, and it was the same exam. So I don't think it's just in my head, but it's certainly more prominent at this moment. And this was first year students.
On the bright side, that's limited evidence of academic dishonesty. So nice job, Zoe.
Yeah, it was in person, so that at least worked. So.
I think that was a very common occurrence, Zoe. I would just say that people giving the exact same outcomes are, and it's just not doing as well. So, I mean, you're couching it as your ineffectiveness, but, circumstances.
But you feel that way.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's the students. I know I haven't done something completely different, but still the result is that I am being less effective, even if it's not my fault.
Yeah, I can think of another interpretation there. That what you're choosing to look at as evidence, very traditional. But I know that you do a lot of things in the classroom that are very effective. They don't always show up in the grades.
I hope so. Let's see.
So what else do you notice where you say, that feels like me, but it's actually burnout?
My version also comes out as a feeling of ineffectiveness as well, most of the time. And I did not know the strategies, but now I kind of see what I was doing. What I do when I have burnout, similar feeling of ineffectiveness, I actually tend to make a list, sometimes mental, sometimes writing it down, of the things I have done, like the good things that I've done. Which shows me that I have been doing things. So that was one way of me dealing with the burnout. And it's very common as people who finish PhDs, taught multiple different courses and like wrote articles, etc. We know that feeling. So that's what I do. I make a list like then and there, like write it down, or sometimes mental. What did I do last month, etc., etc. So then I realize I have done things. That gives a little bit of that feeling of, yeah, I am doing it. It's just, it's just a phase. It will go away. But I didn't know it was actually burnout. That podcast was very helpful in that regard. That putting a label on it, you kind of feel better.
And you can imagine what some of your students would say, right? If you say, I feel like nothing I do is making a difference, or that I'm not competent to do these things, or that I can't figure it out, or that I'm not smart enough, or those thoughts. Well, can you imagine what your students would say if they knew that some of us were thinking those things? They would be shocked, because they see the evidence of our effectiveness all the time on the outside.
For me, listening to the podcast was a little different experience, and I was happy to learn that I'm not experiencing burnout, but I am exhausted. And I think that has a lot to do because I have two kids who are under 3 years old. And so thank you, Liz. I appreciate I appreciate the compassion, the empathy.
Been there, man, but not during a pandemic.
So it's both of those worlds colliding together. But I think my ability to think that I'm still being effective comes from the desperation from our students. And so they've never been more needy. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I've fulfilled all their needs, because it's impossible, because they're so much needier, at least from my perspective, than they've ever been before.
I think that's a really good point, that the components of burnout are actually all very normal experiences. And just because you experience them doesn't mean you're burned out and being exhausted, because you literally cannot get enough sleep with the demands on your time. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And the joys that come with two kids under 3. Yeah.
It gets better as they get older. It gets better.
It gets better.
Every day.
Better,
it gets
and
better.
then you remember it, then you get back, you get these pangs and this nostalgia when you see the pictures of your little kids in footy pajamas. You're like, oh, I'm like, no, remember the psychosis from the lack of sleep? Remember? Yeah, it's real. So,
I hated it when people would say, enjoy this special time.
Like, no.
I'm exhausted. It's not special.
No, you enjoy it in hindsight. Yeah.
Right. So I would share that the podcast helped me to really reflect on my time in COVID testing. Many of you know that I was kind of heading that up for a long time, and helped me to reflect on, that time and kind of where I was at. And I agree with Liz that, what happens for me is just total overwhelmed. And, any little thing just puts me on a hair trigger. And so being able to reflect on that and identifying that at the point for the future, because it will happen again, I'm sure, at some other point. But yeah, and so what I did at that time, and what I think is a helpful strategy is I have to ask for help, because what's happening is I'm just taking too much on, right? And so either asking for help to reprioritize, like, well, what really is important here, or just asking for just, more hands to help carry the load.
So Kathy, one of the things I struggle with is that I wait for a long time to ask for help, and then I feel guilty about asking, because it's so late that it becomes more difficult to help me. It's literally more harder because people are coming in at such a late stage in the game. And then well, it's easier for me to do it myself now, even though I really need help. Like, how do you ask?
So it's also hard now. It's like, I went through a year of cancer treatment when I was a professor. It was 2008, 2009. And it's one thing to ask for help when not everyone is trying to adjust to a pandemic and overwhelmed, and not every office is understaffed by design, right? As we look at budgets and things like that. So it's one thing. So you mentioned your weight, but the other guilt is, but I actually know they're all doing more. Or, right? Like, people were upset about the condition of Mahar this fall, and I'm trying to negotiate that. I'm like, but facilities is down like 30% of the people, right? And it's not, and everyone who comes to fix something is over 55 at least. So this is a problem that's clearly, coming on. So, you're like, well, you need to get on top of this, knowing that they're understaffed, right? And so, or, asking another faculty to take this on, knowing that they're already doing more. They've had to pivot or adjust to a modality that they hadn't done before, or things like that. So I think asking for help is really important, but is now, there's a same group of people that take a disproportionate share, and they're your go-to people. And you want to try to avoid that, and I was, dealing with something, and Lisa Glidden said, well, if you need any help, ask me. I'm like, no, I'm not going to ask you. No offense, but you're like the last person I'm going to ask. And I really mean that as a compliment, because there's no way I'm giving you something else to do. So I think that's a challenge now too.
Yeah. Yeah. And Kathy, what I was saying is that I think it's actually a really excellent coping strategy, and one that I would like to use more. I have such a fabulous group of people around me that I step in at any moment, even though they have a ton of stuff to do, but it's still a struggle. I think we're all socialized in academia to do our things by ourselves, because much of our training was to do it by yourself and show that you could. It's difficult to break out of that.
Well, the other thing that I learned from my experience was that when I asked for help, the response I got was less than supportive. And so as a supervisor or a coach, I learned from that when people come to you, when they're irritable and they're overwhelmed, and they're, that you have to understand what you're dealing with. And that, coming back at that. So I got a nasty response back that I worked through with the person, but that was the last thing I needed as a person who was in the throes of a pretty significant, burnout. And so, the person readjusted. But so as a coach now, when somebody comes to me irritable or, just quite frankly, pissed off at the world, I take a step back and don't internalize it anymore. Because now I know that probably what they're dealing with is that they're not coping, right? The dishwasher broke and it's not my fault. So I've been able to really think about how to help other people work through it too. Because it was terrible. When I'm really, I'm very independent and hardworking and achieving, and, those are all really important to me. And so when somebody says to me, doesn't provide me the support when I ask, I mean, it was just terrible. It was terrible. And we lived through it.
Were they oblivious?
Yeah.
About how much you really needed it? Yeah,
well, absolutely. They were just oblivious about what I was doing and how intense it was, and that I really needed it. Yeah, they were caught up in themselves, really. So, but so I try not to do that to people, right? That's where I took that too. Not that I'm perfect on that either, but Because sometimes when people come to you and they're irritated, it feels like it feels like they're lashing out at you, and they're not necessarily. So, I mean, sometimes they are, but.
I'm realizing, I don't know if everybody knows Shayna. Do you want to say hi?
Sure. And I feel at a little bit of a loss because I thought that this was the podcast. So I didn't listen to the podcast, but I will definitely go back and listen to that. But my experience is a little bit different in that I oversee the Office of Business and Community Relations. And part of my role is we operate several contracts. So a lot of it is really with the outside community. But the one big factor that we have is I oversee the Workforce Development Board of Oswego County. So we oversee the Career Center in Fulton, and the unemployment rate and what was happening within the job market and the labor market. We went from the lowest unemployment rate, about 4%, and we shot up to about 17.9% from that March to April that the pandemic hit. And so businesses were begging for people and, feeling kind of in the middle of it, but you couldn't help and there wasn't anything to do, plus running our department and all the other pieces. So the stress definitely culminated with that feeling of feeling ineffective. And there just wasn't really, here it is. I said, I've never led a team through a global pandemic. I apologize. I don't have a precedent for this. So I think the first was definitely the ineffectiveness and exhaustion. And I think because I'm was feeling cynical, which is not a part of my personality, I really realized that it was hitting me pretty hard. So, but I'm excited to listen to the podcast. But yeah, so my experience is a little bit different in my role because I don't deal a lot with students. So
yeah, I've heard your names.
But I think that there's.
Can you say your first name for us?
Sure, it's China. So it's like long. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
One of
I did put a link to the podcast in chat, so it's there now.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and one of the pieces that is like a critical piece of it is that burnout is a person-workplace mismatch.
Mm-hmm.
It's experienced at the individual level, but it's not because there's something wrong with the individual. It's because the demands of the workplace, how they're experienced by the individual, there's a mismatch. And sometimes the workplace is so stressful that just about anybody would feel burned out in that situation. Other times it's more of a one person might thrive whereas a second might feel burned out. And sometimes it's like a super unfortunate mismatch, like incredibly sexist environment where a male might thrive, but a female.
Right. See, my personality is I thrive on change. I really do. I always love to see what's happening over the horizon, and I love developing programming. But now I'm like, okay, no more change, please. Like I'm burnt out from it. It's just been one thing after the other, and it's been exhausting. And I think the other part of it too, where I'm feeling is the messaging exhaustion. Like saying the same thing, like, when things get back to normal, or when we get here, when we're fully staffed, or I think that piece of it, it's getting a little, it's just like, you don't really know what to say because you feel like after 2 years, that message is kind of getting a bit stale.
Yeah. And the message underneath it too, right? That things will be back to normal, that we've all come to realize that we're not ever going back to something. We're just going forward to something else. Magdalena, how many times have you had to redo your schedule? About 820 times.
I was actually going to say, when you talked about the mismatch of, what did you say?
the workplace environment or the workplace.
Yeah. I'm just really surprised that there aren't more department chairs here, because I can see that could be a problem for us, because we're sort of, all of the faculty, they're doing what they're doing because they love to teach. And, when you become a department chair, that is not what you wanted to do. And I would expect that many of us are just doing it because somebody has to do it. And so you end up doing a lot of things that you're really not enjoying, but they just have to be done. And, you know, it's not, I suppose that there might be some people who really thrive, you know, in that kind of position, because they find out that, hey, this is actually me, you know, but I would expect that most people don't. So anyway.
Yeah.
Your podcast mentions control too. And I think as a department chair and the decision maker, it's really hard because there's just this uncertainty and you have no control. There's no control because decisions have been being made above, and the timing of those decisions can be problematic. And trying to make a good decision with a lack of good forecasting and information. I think all of those things, you know, you mentioned causes as a lack of control, and I do think the pandemic really has been a feature for a lack of control.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that,
yeah, go ahead. No.
And I think that mismatch has become nearly universal everywhere, that, you know, it was more localized to specific cases of mismatch, but because our expectations of what we would be doing have been so different than the reality, we've seen a lot of those mismatches, which ties back to the hope that things will get back to normal, but we don't quite know what that normal will be tomorrow or next week or next month.
Yes.
No, and I think it's fair to say this has been a very disruptive event to higher education, and we're not returning to normal. I don't know what we return to, but it's going to look very different, which again, control, right? This is, you know, we all have a lot invested in this sector and in our careers, and I don't know what the other side's going to be. Better, worse, just different. I don't know. So that would.
Kristen, can I make the leap to Strengths Quest based on this conversation? Would that
Yes.
be okay? So
yes.
I facilitated a great session last week on Strengths, which is I don't know, Kristen, what is it? It's a assessment that you do through the Gallup organization, and it helps you to identify your areas of strength or talent. And I think that mismatch sometimes is related to that. So in that literature, they talk about 1 in 5 of us work to our strengths regularly, and that when you're not working to your strengths, it can be really very frustrating. And so I find when I do tasks that I'm not good at, or that I really struggle through, that my burnout or my, you know, my resilience maybe is much lower. So I try to find ways, you know, that I and other people can try to work to that, to ameliorate the mismatch if you can, right? Like for faculty, sometimes that's not possible because of the tasks that you're involved in, but, you know, I don't know. I think there's an interesting parallel between strengths and burnout.
I think that's a really good point. And sometimes we have more control than we think we do over kind of adjustments of tasks. I think course schedule building is a really good example of that some people don't find it really that onerous. It's just like a list of courses, you put them into times, you check work. It's just a bunch of minutia, and sometimes minutia can be a relief when you're otherwise dealing with like a giant horrible thing. So some people don't find it that onerous, but some people really, really hate it. Like they deeply hate it. And there are some departments that I've seen in the past, there are not a lot here who do it by committee. And it can work. It can work if there are structures in place. And if there's a chair who hates it with their entire being, just sucks the joy out of them every semester, perhaps there's a different way. And that's just one example. There are certain teaching tasks, certain I know I don't invest a lot of time and personal development in being able to build students' writing skills. So if I spend a lot of time in class on papers and developing writing versus critical analysis, which is something I do enjoy, it's just going to be frustrating for me and for them. It's going to take me a huge amount of time because I don't have any efficiencies built in. So I don't assign those kinds of tasks in class. I assign other things that I value more in the kinds of teaching that I do and the kinds of things they're supposed to learn. Now, if somebody told me I absolutely had to, I would find a way, but it would be kind of soul sucking to do it. So where do we have control that we don't realize that are degrees of freedom? And how can we shift those into things that we thrive at, that we find more joy and that we are more successful at? How do we engage the people around us to shift tasks around so that we can be working more towards our strengths?
I also think in your podcast, the community thing really resonated too, that we were not seeing each other in the halls. And like in fall 2020, it was just depressing to be in my, I was one of the few, I was often one of 3 people in the building, right? And on a dreary winter day, it was like a scene from The Shining, right? Is there a serial killer in Mahar? I don't know. So that was hard, and you even mentioned lunches. I think Rebecca talked about, people who eat lunch together. But I also think that it actually, in fact, leading faculty assembly, like things and discussions that have gone wrong were really about people not sitting down in the same room and talking about these things before they actually reach the floor and things like that. So I think it's really kind of, it's eat into not just how people feel, but some of the effectiveness of our institutions.
Yeah, and there was last spring, there was some faculty to faculty conflicts that was rising to me, not just 1 or 2 incidents, several incidents where I'm sure it was similar. They were people who typically don't get along. Like, it's okay. Like, you don't have to love everybody you work with. That's all right. But since they weren't having an opportunity to just run into each other, they were taking offense much faster than they would have typically. So people who are already prickly and don't rub well, it would blow up in a way that it wouldn't have done if they were having regular face-to-face faculty meetings where they could say, hey, how are your kids doing? How's your class? Did you get your car fixed? It's just the kind of little bit of social bonding that we can do on a face-to-face way that we don't do electronically. And you don't, right? You don't want to small talk with people that you don't really, really want to talk to over Zoom. You don't put that into it unless you're already feeling friendly towards them. But you do in a face-to-face setting. So what are you finding that is working for you? Kathy, you mentioned delegation. What else is working for you right now?
Exercise. But that's really hard to do in winter when, it's too cold outside and you have to wear a mask in the gym. And then in some gyms, you're the only one wearing a mask. So you kind of don't want to go there. Anyway, yeah, I think.
I've walked a lot of circles in my house over the past month, many, many circles, but it's not really the same.
Yeah.
I've discovered yoga and exercise on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Magdalena, Cooper Gym is open on campus and empty every day. So great place to be, and masks are mandated because it's on campus. Right. They take this very seriously. So and it's free right now for faculty, FYI.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Free during the break or free during the year?
Yeah, just free during the break. During the semester, it's $8 to $5 a semester. Still reasonable.
Yeah.
Very cheap. Yeah.
Best place during the pandemic, in my opinion. You don't want to be anywhere else because we mandate masks on campus. Students take it seriously. Everyone takes it seriously. So
do they? Okay, that was not my experience in a large class with lots of freshmen. I had probably a third or more of them with them below their nose or below their lips. So despite regular reminders several times each class day.
Those very infectious chins were all.
Apparently, yeah, they were protected.
Rumors had it that the residence halls were a challenge too in terms of getting people to wear masks. I mean, it's like home, right? And they just, they were not.
Well, I mean, I would just say it was a practice that a lot of other universities to not mandate them in the residence halls, you know, and we might have had other New York and SUNY structures, but they were like, no, you know, because students were tested, particularly in vaccinated requirements, they just decided they would make it a bubble. And so visitors weren't allowed and only the residents were allowed in the halls, and it was a mask-free zone. And, you know, I don't know how it affected transmission at other schools, but I know other schools went with that because they just didn't feel, you know, that they could make people wear it in their home.
But yeah, back to Cooper. Cooper's great. Cooper's really great.
What else are folks trying that's working? Even if it's just for like 10 minutes of working.
I've doubled my high blood pressure dose, and that seems to be working. I don't think that's what you're looking for. That's not really the happy ending. But
we'll just call that self-care. You know?
Yeah.
Well, I'll go back to what we talked about earlier, Kristen, which is that, you know, not waiting too long for help, asking for help. You know, a lot of my work is administrative. And so I will be working on something and building it because I'm managing it. And then at the end, you know, I need help. And so many of you know my administrative assistant is Michelle May, and you'll see that I invite her to all my meetings now. And people find that weird sometimes, but if she's in on what I'm working on and she understands the constructs and I CC her in on emails, she knows like what the foundation is. And so I can, at a moment's notice or like halfway to panic, I can say, okay, I need you in now. I need you to come in now and help me. And she's got incredibly high level skills. But if I wait until the end, when I've built it my way and I'm on the cliff, it's just too late. It's too late. So it's easier to just get it done than it is to involve her. So yeah, so really consciously trying to involve her very early on in things has been really helpful.
Okay, do you get the same like huge rush of relief that I do? When I'm struggling with something and I feel super overwhelmed and I finally decide to ask somebody to help me and they say sure, I often get this huge, like a very visceral rush of relief and gratitude. Like, thank God, someone is going to help me with this that I trust, who's going to do a good job.
Right.
I try not to let it show because it can be off-putting to people. If I go, yes.
I would get it if you did that. I would get it.
See, I don't think I've actually done that to Murat, but I have often felt that since he's joined the dean's office. I'm like, can you work on this? He's like, sure. I'm like, yes. Huge rush of relief. John, have you found anything that's helping for you?
What's been happening for me is I keep getting more things dumped on me by the administration right now, like recording these podcasts for middle states, which I had said could not be done while I'm in the middle of running these workshops. And so I've got requests to record 5 of them this week and next week and edit them and get those out. And I have been saying I cannot do them during this 2-week period since late November. I said I can do it in late December. So no, I haven't. What I have found in the last semester was I got to play some music with some friends and do a nice show. And that was a tremendous relief. It made me feel much better and more positive about doing something I could do well, which certainly teaching has not had that feeling this past semester.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, John, I'm with you. I haven't discovered it yet, what's going to help. I definitely feel like I'm in the throes of it. However, I did schedule a vacation in February that I haven't had a vacation in a long, long time. So I'm going to Costa Rica for 10 days. Wonderful. So I hope I come back as a whole new person. So
Wow.
If they let me back into the country.
If they don't, it wouldn't be such a
oh.
I know. I'd be like, oh, I'll bring my computer.
It wouldn't be terrible to be stuck in Costa Rica.
Right.
It's great. Costa Rica is great. Very laid back, beautiful weather. It's going to be great.
I've never been. I'm excited.
Nice.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's
Thank
awesome.
you. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think vacationing and disconnecting sometimes is really important. So, you know, if you can step away from email, not everybody can because of their work, but a lot of us can more than we do. And I think that that's really, and just put up an away message that I have very limited access to my emails at this time. And then you can read them, but you don't have to respond. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been trying to do that more, find that balance and really put it away and not think about it, try to transition, think about other things. But I also bought a house last year. So a lot of transitioning and moving, which was chaos, but at the same time, it was something else to do because what else were we going to do during COVID? So it gave me something to focus on. And so it was kind of just distractions I'm finding in my personal life that have felt like a little bit made me feel renewed slightly, but yeah, it's been a challenge. I think the other part too is a big concern about how my staff is feeling, right? Understanding some of the challenges that they have in their life. So a big part of what we were doing during the pandemic was making sure that we were getting together each week and trying to just schedule time just to check in, doing fun things that we could do together, you know, even if it was like having happy hours or carving pumpkins together. And it sounds really silly, but when you hadn't been out of the house in 4 months, it really quite made a difference and helped us to bond and kind of get through it together. So.
Nice.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. We did a lot of creative things. And really, I think the other part too is just kind of asking my office manager if they had ideas and really kind of turning it over to them and saying, what was it that we're going to do together? Not thinking that I had to have all the answers or that I did, but just asking the group for what it was that they needed, what we could do, putting it all out on the table, you know, assuming this is how we're feeling and how are we going to work on this together, empowering them to help in the effort.
I also noticed that this group here, you other 8 people, you're all highly responsible people. You're all people that I feel like if I reached out to you and said, I need help with this and this, can you work on this? You would all say yes. But I can tell you not all of your colleagues would. Some of them would say no. And you know what? They do. And I don't even get my feelings hurt. I get momentarily irritated, but it's only like that frustration of, well, they said no, who am I going to ask next? Because I got to get somebody to say yes. So we all actually could say no sometimes. And it would be okay. And there are actually other people right down the hall from you that do this.
I have to say, this is coming from the queen of yes. Kristen, you were a queen of yes. So.
Yes, but I know I could say no. It's just people keep asking me to do interesting things. And then I don't want to say no. I want to say yes to that. But I have been positively inspired over the years by the number of people that I work with, that I've worked with, that I respect, that I think are really fabulous colleagues who say no to stuff. And I keep learning from them how to do that. Look who said no. Good for them. Now I have to find somebody else, but yay for them that they figured out how to do that. And they said, these are the things I'm working on right now. So I don't have time to add this other project. I'm like, oh, that's really good. Good for them.
Up until this year, one of the things we always had requested for a workshop was on time management. And the problem is the people who would be best at that are the people who tend to say no. And they've said no to doing a workshop on that because they were taking the time off to do other things.
That's the number one.
See, I just want one on email management, but what I really want is for someone to say, there's actually this magical solution where you just don't have to do much. And apparently that is not a successful strategy.
So saying no to students, I think, is a very good skill to learn, because when, we talked about the neediness, and there's some things that they will ask for, and there's really, you're not obligated to do that. And I think if people talk to each other more in hallways, they're like, no, you don't have to give a extra review session. No, you don't have to give them a review sheet. Like if you want to, if you have time for that, that's fine. But they will ask for a lot of extra things that, that really just, you're not obligated to do that.
And you can say it in a really compassionate and supportive way. Yeah. Right? Like, here's the tools that I provided. This is what you should look at. Yeah, you're exactly right.
But can you say specifically for those of us on the tenure track, how can we say no? Like if Magdalena asked me to do something, I could never say no. I don't know this.
You could.
Yes, I think, yeah, I do think there are cases where junior faculty are underestimating their ability to say no. Like say, if I say no to this, I'll get dinged or something like that. But I've never even heard of these cases. Like, I don't want to say anything. When we were talking about COVID protocols, as we started with Delta in the fall, I would get messages in my leadership role saying, well, but I'm untenured or I'm not even on the tenure track and I'm too vulnerable. And if I say something, and I said, first of all, I'll be the voice for you. I don't have a problem pissing people off, clearly. But the other issue is I've never seen someone fired or getting employment action in 26 years because they said an unpleasant truth or they said, this isn't safe or I'm not comfortable with that. So, I would argue we just don't have that kind of vindictiveness around here. So I think that's a knee-jerk thing. And I know it's always good advice to sort of be cautious and not rock the boat.
So that's fair. Yeah.
I think there's a difference between saying, we'll fire you because of this and just saying, oh, well, you haven't quite done enough and we wanted you to do more. Right.
Yeah. I think it's very reasonable to have a conversation though. And say, here's the things that I'm spending my time on. This is taking all of my time. Is there something on this list that you would want me to take off? And then I can do this other thing. I think that's a perfectly fair conversation. And I think that's something we should all be able to talk with people in a supervisory role about. Like, I'm actually putting all of my time into this stuff. And yes, we can add more stuff if you want. Let's take some off. What should we take off? Like, do you want me to pick up this heavy service obligation? In that case, I really can't pick up a new course prep at the same time because that's like a huge amount of time. So which one is it going to be? And occasionally the department chair is in a very tough quote who needs both, in which case then the department chair talks to me and says, and then we talk about extra service and stuff like that. But yeah, I every single chair that I work with in class right now, I think would be willing to have that conversation. Some would be better at it than others. We'll just say that. But.
Well, I think that comes into the ineffectiveness. If you're, the quality just starts to suffer. And the multitasking and then the switching from my role, do a lot of administration, we do budgets, we do contracts. And then so if I'm constantly switching, I create these error traps. And then that's where I start to feel really ineffective. And that's the part of it that's saying no, which I have not mastered either. But like, I am starting to get to the point and say, this is what we have. If I'm going to take something on, then something has to go. That part is, I've been like, that has to happen because it's such an issue with the quality if it doesn't happen. So of the work. So.
Okay. Do you have a list of like 50 things where you think if I could spend 2 hours on this one and 2 hours on this one, I would bring them both, and those 2 hours just are not happening?
I put it actually, that's how I build my calendar. Is that because I always say that there is enough time to do the work. I try to fool myself into thinking that. So I'll block out time and I put time blocks on my calendar, but then you don't anticipate that fire that you need to put out. So then you move it and, you do your best, but yeah, that's how I try to operate. That's what I learned in time management.
There's also like a slow creep of not new tasks, but new ways of doing tasks that take longer. I'm talking APHIS, for example, right? So, some things, things they're doing with, I don't know, I think Zoe, you were complaining about degree works. There are like some things that, some functionality that went away.
Yeah.
Now things take longer.
Things on Banner, it's harder
so we're
to
doing
get
the
to
same
everything.
things. We're doing the same things, but they take longer, right?
Mhm.
Right. And this summer, we're going to ask a bunch of people to do a bunch of work to move to a different learning management system, which I think is a long run improvement. I know when I know people kind of freaked out when some freaked out because they had just begun to learn how to use Blackboard because the pandemic forced them to, and then they were freaked out of something new. And so, you know, as I can weigh it as a big user of learning management systems that, well, this will be better, so I'll just suck it up. But, you know, it's and the work is going to have to be done technically when we're not being paid for people on a 10-month contract. Right, that's when it's going to have to be done. It's
going to be painful, and the timing was really bad.
The timing is terrible, and again, it's not completely in the control of this campus, but there is, you know, among faculty here, you know, there is a, you know, the workload just keeps ratcheting up, or we see that something has to be done at the endpoint, but when you back up to the process, we chose something that's particularly difficult, or you know, it's what's the maximum number of clicks I can actually have to do this task.
And I know you raise a broader kind of theme, which I certainly think that every new role that you step in, you will never be less busy. The least busy you'll ever be is like the first day you started. And then the regular duties come in, and then people are like, oh, try these things. And then processes change. And then we just become busier and busier in every single role. And faculty certainly notice this. Like they come in very excited and yet stressed and kind of freaked out as if they're on tenure track as a new tenure track person, but their responsibilities and their time, they just increase each year forever after. And that's true in every role. So the question is how happens, what do we actively do to keep pulling it back into something more manageable? How do we carve things out and push them off? Because things will always be added. Stuff always gets added. And if for those of you who have gone from assistant to associate professor, you felt it, right? Like every year, there's a bit more, and you either cope and figure it out, or you push stuff off so it becomes more manageable. But it's a constant kind of truism. And in academia, certainly, as well as in many other sectors. So we can rail against it, which is not a bad thing, by the way, because that is one way to keep it from growing too quickly. We can rail against it. We have to figure out strategies to literally pull pieces off at the same time.
Yeah. I think the other thing too I look at is really trying to assess high value versus low value work, you know, for what really is important in our role and our responsibilities, and trying to operationalize low value work. And so when we went remote, we changed everything over digital. We went through the whole Dropbox system, everything that we had, anything that we processed became a digital document. It was signed digitally, so it was an email. So basically that was really low value work that took a lot of time. So we just tried to create efficiencies in the operation so that we could focus on the higher value work of our staff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I've heard Liz say many things that all come to that theme. I think my very favorite version of it was assessment work that takes more time than it's worth. Something along those lines.
Uses more energy, right, than it produces. Yeah.
Exactly. That you find a way to out the pieces that are actually not really worth your time, and increase the value on the pieces that are worth your time. Liz, I think you're our spokesperson for that theme institution-wide. We spend our time on things that matter. Oh, we're out of time.
I was just thinking that, yeah, because we've got another workshop coming up in a couple minutes. So
sorry about that.
This was a really good discussion, and this is a topic that everyone is considering. This, by the way, was our most popular podcast for this year, and it's just about 6 away from being 4th in our all-time list. And the only ones that are above it are the ones that came out right during the onset of the pandemic. And this is creeping up there. And we'll probably pass most of those over the next couple of months. So it's a topic we're all experiencing in some way. So thank you.
True. Okay. Good to see everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.